Rabbi Gesundheit began with Farbrengen this afternoon that this is a Shabbos that has many inyonim within the Shabbos. Number one, it's Shabbos. And Shabbos in itself also has several things which are combined in Shabbos. First of all, Shabbos is a remembrance of HaKadosh Baruch Hu creating the world in 6 days and Him resting on the seventh. This is how Shabbos began originally. Later, after Matan Torah, there was something else which was included in Shabbos, and that is the fact that Shabbos also is a reminder on the inyan of Yitzias Mitzrayim and Matan Torah and so forth. This is regarding Shabbos in general. More particular, this Shabbos is a Shabbos in the month of El. A step further, not only is it a Shabbos in Elul, but this is the Shabbos of Chai Elul. What is the inyan of Chai Elul? So we all know famous quotation from the Rabbeim that express themselves that Chai Elul means Chai, this day of Elul, gives life, gives us a Chayis in the Avodah of Elul. What is the Avodah of Elul? The Rebbe continues. The Avodah of Elul, so during Elul we have to excel in Torah, Avodah, and in Gemilas Chasadim, and all three pillars that the world stands on. And in fact, for each one of them, we have an abbreviation which on the word of Elul. Popular known Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi Li, which abbreviates Elul. Ish L'Rayeyu U'Matones L'Avyoinim is also an abbreviation of Elul. Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi Li reflects how in Elul we get close to the Eibishter in a way through Tefillah. Ish L'Rayeyu U'Matones L'Avyoinim. This is a pasuk that has a shaykhis to Gemilas Chesed. Then there's the pasuk Inno Liyodoi Besamti Lecha, which is also a pasuk regarding Arei Miklat. This pasuk is mentioned. Arei Miklat means cities of refuge. If one killed somebody else unintentionally, then he was to go to exile into a city of refuge. So it's explained that Divrei Torah, words of Torah, are also killed in, it's like a refuge for a person, not for killing chas v'shalom physically, but spiritually. Divrei Torah is a protector. Words of Torah, when a person gets involved in learning Torah, it's koiled, it's a refuge for the one who's learning Torah. So the Mela regarding Inna Liyadi V'Samti Lacha, which is also an abbreviation for the word Elul, this is a reminder how during the month of Elul we are to excel in the learning of Torah. Also there's an abbreviation, Oshira Lashem Vayoimru Leimer, which is an expression of Shira. And here again we have, all of these are the first letter in each one of these words begins with a letter that puts together the word Elul. For example, Oshira Lashem, Vayoimru Leimer. So we have Aleph of Oshira, the Lamed of Hashem, Vayoimru is the Vav, and Leimer again a Lamed. So this called a Rashi Tevis. This puts together the word of Elul. So again, showing us what's the meaning of Shira. Shira, song and praise. Also a way of getting close to the Rebishter. So in all of these areas, we are to excel during the month of Elul. And here we are told that on the day of Chai Elul gives us strength to be able to hold out and fulfill whatever we are supposed to during the month of Elul. Just like a soul gives strength to the body, that the body should be able to function. And the same way the Rebbe says, Shabbos has also this inyan. Shabbos gives us strength that we should be able to hold out the entire week. Famous expression from the Zohar, Shabbos minei mizborchin kulu yomin, that Shabbos gives bracha to the entire week. So similar to, as we explained by Shabbos, similar like we find by the soul within the body of the person. The same is the idea, Chai Elul, this is a day which gives us strength to be able to fulfill the Avodah of Elul. How much more so is all of this when not only is it in the Shabbos of Chai Elul, but when we are in a year that the entire year is a Shabbos, because this year is a Shnas HaShemitah. So the entire year has the advantage of a Shabbos. What's the meaning of a Shnas HaShmita? Shnas HaShmita, when Yidden had a sabbatical year and they were not allowed to do any work in their field, normally a person is busy and occupied in his field and in the work and with his trees and with his vineyards. However, it comes the year of Shemitah, he's prohibited to do this. When a Yid is prohibited to do this, what does he do? Then naturally he's involved more in the learning of Torah. So this is the year which we are in now, with the year of Shemitah. And Shemitah also has another advantage, that Shemitah prepares us to Hakel. Hakel is the mitzvah which was in the Beis HaMikdash, that the Sukkos, which was come following the Shemitah year, that Sukkos, everyone, Anoshim, Noshim, V'taf, men, women, and children, would all have to gather to the Beis HaMikdash, and the Melech, the king, would read for them certain parshiyos in the Torah. The Gemara describes at length what it looked like when the Yidden all gathered for Hakel. Memele, Shemitah also has this plus, that it prepares Yidden to the mitzvah of Hakel. So how much more so is it this Shabbos? This Shabbos is a real special Shabbos. Memele, the Rebbe concluded that this Shabbos is an opportune time for proper hachlotos, for proper decisions, and that these decisions should be brought down into reality, because we can realize what kind of an outstanding time is such a Shabbos. And especially when a Yid puts his avodah into the Shabbos. The Rebbe explains, Shabbos is mekacher v'kaima. The Gemara says, Shabbos is something which is fixed into the universe. When the Rebbe created the world, he created the Shabbos. So automatically, after 6 days, there's a Shabbos. However, there's the expression kol ha'me'aneg es ha'Shabbos. The Gemara says a Yid who brings honor and joy into Shabbos. What does this mean? In other words, as Chassidus explained it, in Shabbos there are two levels. There's the level of Shabbos, the way Shabbos stands, mitzad itself, as it was created. Then there's how Shabbos is yet more uplifted through the avodah of Yidden. Yidden are, through their avodah, being ma'aneg es HaShabbos, bringing oinik, pleasantness into Shabbos. By this they are uplifting Shabbos to a yet higher madrega. This happens through the avodah, through the koiches of Yidden. And the Mela, this Shabbos, as we just explained, all the pluses of this Shabbos, so it's a real outstanding day. What is the inyan of Chai Elul? The Rebbe continues. Chai Elul is the day, Yom Haledes, the birthday of the Shnei HaMa'oros HaGdolim, the two giants that illuminated the world, meaning the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid. The Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe. Even though, Rebbe right away added on, who are we to begin evaluating the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe and bring out differences between the Baal Shem Tov and Alter Rebbe? This is not something which is within our capacity. But on the other hand, we are told that this is this is the inyan of the date of Chai Elul. It's the birthday of these two giants that have illuminated the world spiritually. And here the Rebbe referred to something which was related by the Rebbe Rashab, that is the Frierdiker Rebbe's father. Frierdiker Rebbe's father related that it was once on a Chai Elul, also on a Shabbos, in the year of Tov Reish Nun Beis. That time the Frierdiker Rebbe was a young child, he was a 12-year-old child. And his father, the Rebbe Rashab, on that Chai Elul, had an Aliyas HaNeshama. In other words, his soul went up to heaven, to Gan Eden, to Shema, while he was living on this world. And on Chai Elul, he heard 7 Torahs, 7 various interpretations of Torah, which was said by the Baal Shem Tov on Chai Elul Lamayla. And the Rebbe said, even though in Chabad we don't put much stress on inyanim of nisim, and inyanim of moifsim, and miracles, and so forth, however, this was related to us through the Frierdiker Rebbe. Obviously, Rebbe added on, the Frierdiker Rebbe did not know about it at the time when it happened, because at that time he was a 12-year-old child. And it was related to him in later years by his father. regarding the inyan of Chayil. In general, and in particular, the Torahs which his father heard from the Baal Shem Tov. Here the Rebbe also mentioned that in general, though we take for granted that Chayil is something which is so known and popular. It's birthdays of the Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov. And to us it's something which we take for granted. Everybody knows about it. Still, this is something which was not known until the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, was the one who made popular the date of Chayil. Prior to that, throughout all the generations of the Rabbeim, it was something which was kept a secret. And it was only the Rabbeim and their children and their immediate family that were aware about this date and that this is the birthday of the Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov. The general mass of Chassidim did not know about it. It's something which was revealed by the previous Rebbe. The Rebbe says, if we're going to discuss this Shabbos, as mentioned before, there are many inyanim in this Shabbos. However, we will discuss what is closest to us. And what is closest to us? This inyan of this Shabbos being the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe. We find something very similar to this in the prayer of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. When the Kohen Gadol goes to pray on Yom Kippur and he asks for forgiveness, he asks first for himself, for his family, and then for Klal Yisrael. What do we derive from this? From this we learn that first a person takes care of what is closest to him. Same thing. Now, even though this Shabbos is a special Shabbos, and it's Shabbos, and it's a Shabbos in the Shemitah year, and all the explanations which we just gave, but nonetheless, being that there is something which is closer to us, the fact that it's the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, this is what we will discuss. Rebbe added, though, regarding the Kohen Gadol, we could learn different. We could learn why is it that first he prays for himself and for his family, and then he prays for the entire Klal Yisrael. This the Rebbe says we can learn because who can ask for forgiveness for Klal Yisrael? One whose sins were already forgiven. If he himself is not clean, how could he ask for forgiveness for Klal Yisrael? So that is why first he asks for himself, then he asks for his family. Once he and his family were forgiven, then he's already in a position to ask for forgiveness for Klal Yisrael. True, this is also an interpretation which can be given regarding the Kohen Gadol, but at the same time it is also true what we just mentioned, the fact that we derive from this, that whatever is closest, this is what we stress on most. And the same here regarding Chayil. And Chayil, this is, as mentioned, the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov, the birthday of the Alter Rebbe, and here the Rebbe went into the, as we just mentioned, the Aliyah Saneshama, which the Frierdiker Rebbe's father had in the year Tafresh Nun Beis on Chayil, and he brought back 7 Torahs, 7 interpretations in Torah which he heard from the Baal Shem Tov. In fact, the Rebbe Rashab related and described exactly what it looked like Lamaila when the Baal Shem Tov said all these Torahs. To some of these Torahs, only Friday night, men and women were present. To the Torahs which the Baal Shem Tov said Shabbos, only men were present, women were not present. He gave a precise description of everything what went on. So the Rebbe asks a question. We know in Halacha, ein mashgichem bebaskor. Somebody should hear a sound from heaven regarding the Psak Halacha and Torah, we don't pay attention to it. Torah was given over by the Rebbe to us Yidden, that we are to put it through our understanding, and through our minds and our intellect, and this is how we can come out and pass in Torah. Torah loy b'shamayim. Torah is no longer in heaven. So the Rebbe is asking, based on this, what role does it have, Divrei Torah, which the Rebbe Rashab heard Lamayla? We're talking now that the whole inyan in Torah is the way Torah was given over to Nevroyim Lamata on this world. So what does he make it? Making the issue and explaining of the Torahs that he heard by the Baal Shem Tov, it's an inyan which is Bashamay. Here the Rebbe explains, we find, Sidus explains that there's a major difference between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. house of Shammai and the house of Hillel, and learning of Torah, Beis Shammai always go l'chumrah, and Beis Hillel are always lenient. Beis Shammai always go the hard way, and Beis Hillel go the easy way. So see, this explains where does this originate from? Because the shoirish, the source of the soul of Beis Shammai, of Shammai, and Mamela, all of his house, the disciples of Shammai, Lamaila is the source of Gevurah, strength. And therefore, when it comes down to Paskin halacha, the halacha is brought out l'chumrah. On the other hand, Beis Hillel's source is of Chesed, from Chesed, and that is why they always go the lenient way. So again, we see that reflection of the source of neshama, the way the neshama stands l'mayla, is reflected in a psak halacha, as that the halacha is coming out here lamata. How can we allow that? So the Chassidus explains, it is so l'mayla, but it also affects the matter, that the matter becomes in such a way. Memela, it means that anyone from the house of Shammai was taken ish gevurah, and being that within him he had the midos, a tendency of gevurah within him, that is why when it came to a halacha, he passed l'chumrah. On the other hand, Hillel, not only because the source of his soul is that way, this source of his soul affected his being takeh. And Memela, he was such a person that he was an ish chesed. Therefore, when a question in halacha arose, how did he paskin? He paskined with a leniency to chesed. He was lenient about it, and he leaned to chesed. The same the Rebbe says, when the Rebbe Rashab is relating to us Torahs from Shemayim, which he heard from the Baal Shem Tov, he takeh heard it from the Baal Shem Tov. But when the Rebbe Rashab related it to us, it's like he's relating to us an Inyan which already became united with him and went through the Rebbe Rashab's understanding and his understanding and his seichel and in his chokhmah bina v'das. Remember, is something which he's understanding in a Torah which he's aware of, he's sharing with us. Why is it important to mention that he heard it from the Baal Shem Tov in heaven, in Shemayim? Rabbi adds on, this makes it more dear to the listeners. When we hear that this is a quotation from the Baal Shem Tov, which was said by the Baal Shem Tov in Shemayim, and it gives us the whole description, it gives some sort of a chavivus, some sort of a dearness, some sort of a special attention to this Divrei Torah. And here the Rebbe went on that though we find between the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, we find a difference. He explained it in Hasidic terminology. The Baal Shem Tov, when it came to Divrei Torah, Baal Shem Tov primarily worked with his disciples. Baal Shem Tov had Talmidim. We're talking once he already became a Nasi and led the Nasias of Chassidus HaKlolis. General Hasidic movement which was founded by the Baal Shem Tov. So the Baal Shem Tov worked with his disciples. And automatically, from up, down, milmaylo, lamato, his disciples had an influence on the mass of Yidden in general. The Alter Rebbe, on the other hand, said words of Torah and tried to reach out with his quotations of Torah to everyone. Milmato lamaylo, reach to the mato and try to uplift the mato to come higher to, he should come higher and higher. In fact, the Rebbe added on that the Alter Rebbe had his own Baalei Tshuva, people whom he reached out to and made them as Baalei Tshuva, whom he worked individually with, so that he should lift them milmato lemaylo. So even though there are differences between the derech of the Baal Shem Tov and the derech of the Alter Rebbe, however, when it comes Chai Elul, here we say it's the birthday of the Shnei HaMoiras HaGdolim, both of them, they are both combined. This is just like we say that at the time when Mashiach will come, Mashiach will accomplish that it will be la'asova tzadikaya b'tiyufta, that even tzadikim will also get involved in the avodah of tshuva, which means it will be a combination of both avodas, the avodah of tzadikim and the avodah of Baalei Tshuva. So here we are talking on this day of Chai Elul. Here it's such a day when we have the combination of both avodas. There's the avodah of the Baal Shem Tov as well as the avodah of the Alter Rebbe. Especially there's a quotation, I think it's in a pasuk, Teferes zikenim b'nei bonim. The beauty of elders is when they have grandchildren. And we know that the relationship between the Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov was a relationship where the Alter Rebbe used to call the Baal Shem Tov his Zayde. He was his spiritual Zayde, because the Alter Rebbe was a disciple of the Maggid of Mizrich. The Maggid of Mizrich being a disciple from the Baal Shem Tov, so he wasn't his physical grandson, but he was his spiritual grandson. So it again stresses the relationship between the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, and how it's both united on this day, on the day of Chayil. Here the Rebbe went further, explaining an inyan regarding, which we just mentioned, regarding the 7 Torahs which were said by the Baal Shem Tov on the Shabbos of Chayil, Kafresh and Beis, and which the Rebbe Rashab later related. So the Rebbe says that the way the 7 Torahs were written down, were recorded in writing, which is based on how the Rebbe Rashab related them. In the middle, it is mentioned a few times, Chaser, that there's something missing. It's incomplete. So apparently, why is it incomplete? I mean, if he's already relating it to us, why did he miss out a certain piece which he didn't relate? If the whole thing would have not reached us, it's either. But being that it is already reaching us, why did he leave out, and it's put into the script of the 7 Torahs, Chaser? Here the Rebbe put another interesting example. We all know that the Alter Rebbe wrote the Shara Yichud Ve'emunah. The Alter Rebbe had one of his closest disciples was a chassid by the name of Rebbe Ernst Rasheller. This Rebbe Ernst Rasheller was extremely close to the Mittler Rebbe, with Alter Rebbe's son. They were practically like raised together. They were heavily involved together in the studying of the Torah of the Alter Rebbe. Later, after the Alter Rebbe passed away, the Mittler Rebbe became Rebbe. I'm just mentioning this for our own knowledge. Later, Rebbe Ernst Rasheller kind of parted away from the Mittler Rebbe, and he did no longer did he remain a chassid of the Mittler Rebbe. Rebbe Ernst Rasheller, however, wrote Svarim and Chassidus, and he wrote a biur on the Shara Yichud Ve'emunah of the Alter Rebbe. The Rebbe tells us that the first print of the Shara Yichud Ve'emunah, it's also printed Chaser, that there's something missing. It's incomplete. And Rebbe Ernst Rasheller writes in his explanation on Shara Yichud Ve'emunah how there are parts that are incomplete in the Shara Yichud Ve'emunah, that the Alter Rebbe really intended to write more, but for whatever reason the Alter Rebbe never completed. In later prints, the editions of Tanya which we have access to today, the word Chaser in the Shara Yichud Ve'emunah is no longer there. So what happened? Now the Shara Yichud Ve'emunah became complete all of a sudden. So the Rebbe is learning, first of all, that the word Chaser, that it's missing now, it's not that somebody who just prepared the edition decided on his own that he'll eliminate the word Chaser. It was done with the approval of the later Rabbeim, who administered the later printings of the editions of the Tanya, and they allowed to delete the word Chaser, that it's no longer missing. What does it mean? The Rebbe is learning that in later years, the Rabbeim, the Messiah of Chabad, Mittler Rebbe, so forth, they constantly kept on saying Inyanim Chassidus. And by the Inyanim Chassidus, which they said and which they revealed, so there is no longer anything missing now in the Shara Yichud Ve'emunah, because whatever was missing when the Shara Yichud Ve'emunah was originally printed, it was already added on by the later Rabbi. The Rebbe is bringing this in as an example regarding to the 7 Torahs of the Baal Shem Tov. So regarding the 7 Torahs of the Baal Shem Tov, the Rebbe uses the expression she uses many times in the Farbrengens, Tein lechacham v'yechkam oy. Leave it up to the wise, give it to the wise, and the wise on his own will dwell yet deeper. So the same here regarding the 7 Torahs. It's also the same meaning. Being that it was given over to a chacham, it's given over to Yidden who are chachamim, who are wise, so it is our obligation to dwell into it on our own and try and reach and understand it in depth in such a way that v'yechkam oid, The Rebbe is learning that the V'yechkam Oid, the level which the Chacham will reach by his own understanding, will be a yet deeper one than the level of Tein LeChacham than what is given to him. A person is b'koyach to reach much deeper on his own than what he's taught and what's given to him. We are told Chaser that there are pieces missing in the seven Torahs. Why are we told Chaser? Because Tein LeChacham, it was given to the Chacham. Now it's the obligation of the wise, V'yechkam Oid, to dwell into it, get deeper and deeper, so that he should come to it and should be complete. Here the Rebbe is continuing that the Rebbe Rashab relates to us that there were some Torahs which men and women were present. The Friday night Torahs. The Shabbos by day Torahs, only men were present and women were not present. The Rebbe says now that these seven Torahs are published already, so women could have access to it as well as men. Obviously we see from the attitude of the Baal Shem Tov that some of the Torahs women were present, and some of them they were not present. So we see from this attitude that he did not want certain Torahs to reach to women. And now that it's printed, it's accessible to every woman as well. So here the Rebbe explains it that the Alter Rebbe had a daughter. The Alter Rebbe had a daughter by the name of Freda, one of his daughters. The Mittler Rebbe, who was the Alter Rebbe's son, her brother, it was many times that he was looking for various interpretations on Inyanim Chassidus from his father. And it seemed like he felt that if he would go in and ask his father this Inyan Chassidus, he would not get it out of him. What did he do? He prepared his sister and gave her a list of questions and told her to go in to the Alter Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe would respond to her, and he would either stand behind the door and listen to what the Alter Rebbe is telling her, or she would later relate him what the Alter Rebbe told her. And we can imagine what type of person she was. Incidentally, the Rebbe didn't mention it today, but we're talking about her. Right? It's a very interesting episode which is related. The Mittler Rebbe once asked his sister, Freda, to go into their father, the Alter Rebbe, and get a Chassidish interpretation on the whole inyan of Bigdei Kehunah, the garments which the Kohen used to wear in the Beis HaMikdash. And a specific interpretation on each and every one of them. First a general interpretation, and then a detailed interpretation on each and every one of the garments. She went in, and she asked her father, and her father got into an in-depth Chassidish interpretation. However, the Mittler Rebbe, who was listening behind the door, is realizing that she's about to go out, and regarding the avneit, which is like the gartel, which the Kohen Gadol wore, she did not get an interpretation on that. And he's sensing that she's about to part from her father, she's about to walk out of the room, and he's going to be missing the interpretation on the avneit. So he walks around from the other side of the room, and takes his gartel, and throws it in through the window. She saw the gartel coming in through the window, so she immediately reminded herself that she did not ask her father an interpretation on the avneit. But I mean, this gives us a little bit of an idea. I mean, she had a tremendous understanding in Chassidus, an unusual understanding. And the Mittler Rebbe, to get Biyurim Chassidus from the Alter Rebbe, would channel it through his sister. So what does this show us? This shows us that there are inyanim in Torah that have a shaykhis to neshamis, the tchura, the tchar, to male neshamis, and there are inyanim in Torah that have a shaykhis to female neshamis. And that is why these inyanim in Torah had to be channeled through the Mittler Rebbe's sister, through the Alter Rebbe's daughter. However, once these inyanim in Torah are revealed, naturally it has a shaykhis to everyone. Torah has a shaykhis to everyone. Talking about this attitude of the Alter Rebbe, Mittler Rebbe and his daughter, Rebbe tied it in, there's a pasuk, Mayim knuvim yimtoku. Stone water has a special sweetness. In other words, when we get something not in an indirect way, there's a special especially appreciated. And the Rebbe mentioned the famous story that the Alter Rebbe, when he was a disciple by the Maggid of Mizrach, the Alter Rebbe had a set time when he would be learning Torah with the Maggid's son, the Malach. And they made up that they would learn a certain amount every day or every night. What did the Alter Rebbe do? The Alter Rebbe would play around with the clock that stood in front of them. So if they originally made up to learn only for an hour, they would learn much longer, but the Alter Rebbe would move back the clock. The Malach, as we refer to him, Maggid's son, he was a Malach. Why was he called Malach? Because he was totally out of this world. He really had no shaykhs to Gashmias whatsoever. So it was not within his caliber to pay attention whether the Alter Rebbe is moving the clock or not moving the clock. So as long as it didn't come to the next hour, hour and a half, or whatever time they had made up, they would learn together. Later, the Alter Rebbe expressed himself that he had a special enjoyment out of this time in Torah, which kind of like he stole from the Malach. It's Mayim Gnuvim, stone waters. We're talking about water, it's water of Torah. Torah is compared to water. This had a special mesikus, a special sweetness. He especially appreciated that. Rebbe referred here to another Indian Al Pi Kabbalah, that Yitzchak, from the Avis, Yitzchak originally had an neshama from Alma de Nukva, an neshama of an Nekeva. And that is why Yitzchak originally was not having children. But it's later through Tefillah, and through special stress in Tefillah, which Yitzchak had, that he was zeicha also to a neshama of a zacha, to a neshama of a decha. In other words, the Rebbe brought this in, talking about the inyanim, how we find that certain inyanim in Torah have a shaykhis. It's an inyan in Kabbalah. But certain inyanim in Torah have a shaykhis to zacha, and have a shaykhis to nekeva, and so forth. As it's customary in the later part of the Farbrengens, that the Rebbe discusses an inyan in Pirkei Avos, and also an inyan in Pirush Rashi and Chumash, an inyan in the Rambam, and an inyan in Likutei Levi Yitzchak. In Pirkei Avos today, we recite 2 prokim. Being that we finished by Rosh Hashanah, so today we recite the 3rd and the 4th parak. And next week we will recite the 5th and 6th, and next week is already the Shabbos before Rosh Hashanah. So first of all, the Rebbe raised the question. We know that at the beginning of every parak, we recite the Mishnah of Kol Yisrael. At the end of every parak, we recite Reb Chananya ben Akash. What do we do when we recite 2 prokim? Do we say it only once, the Kol Yisrael at the beginning of the 3rd, and Reb Chananya ben Akash at the end of the 4th? Or no, being that it's 2 separate prokim, after we finish the 3rd parak, we again say Reb Chananya ben Akash. We begin the 4th with Kol Yisrael and conclude it again with Reb Chananya ben Akash. So the Rebbe says, some of us may think, there's no Issa to be mafsik between the 3rd and the 4th parak. It's not like the middle of davening where we're not allowed to say certain things. So, what's the big thing? We'll say it. We're finished. Just saying another few good lines. Why not say it? The Rebbe says this is not so. In Torah, everything has to be clarified. And we can't just say things and at the time when we don't know whether we should say it or we shouldn't say it. For example, there's a klal in halacha, there's a general rule in halacha, koicha de hetera odif. Torah appreciates when somebody can come out and prove how something is mutter, how something is permitted. The question is, why? Let us be machmer and finished. It's a question whether you're allowed to eat this. So you're not allowed to eat this, why search for heterim, don't eat it, and you've solved all problems? No, this is not what Torah wants. Torah wants everything to be clear. The whole inyan of Torah is a birur advarim. In other words, everything should be clarified. And now when we're talking about here whether we should say it or we shouldn't say it, it's also the same approach. It's not somebody will say an attitude, let's say it, or it doesn't do any harm to say it. We have to have a klarkeit. We have to know clear exactly whether it is required to be said or it isn't required. We may view it that it becomes like one perek, just like the Rebbe always mentions when we combine 2 sedras. When 2 sedras are read on one Shabbos, they really become one sedra. The same when we are reciting 2 prokim on one Shabbos, it becomes like 1 perek. Memela, it's sufficient to say Kol Yisrael only at the beginning of the 3rd, and Reb Chananya ben Akash at the end of the 4th. Or maybe Pirkei Avos is different. But anyways, it's a question which an answer on it has to be found. In Perek Gimel, which is the 3rd, the Rebbe did not come out with a clear decision. Perek Gimel, which is the 3rd Perek, stands for the number of Gimel, 3. Then we come to Dalet, which is the 4th. In Hasidic terminology, this would be, there is number Gimel and number Dalet. What is Gimel and Dalet? Gimel is Bria, Yetzira, Asiya. The 3 worlds. Atzila is Bria, Yetzira, I'm sorry. What is the inyan of Dalet? Also including Asiya, Af Asisif. This is actually what at the end of Pirkei Avos, at the very end of Pirkei Avos, which we'll recite with Hashem next week, is brought the pasuk Kol HaNikra B'Shmi U'Lechvaydi Berosiv Yitzartiv Af Asisif. So first comes Shmi and Kvaydi, which has a shaykhus to Atzilus. Then comes Berosiv and Yitzartiv, which is the first 3 worlds. Then there's a Af, which is like a break in the middle, and then comes to Asisif. In other words, we have inyanim as they are standing in the first 3 worlds, and then we have an inyan as it's coming down in the 4th world, in the world of Asiyah. The first 3 worlds are spiritual worlds. Asiyah, already we have a shaykhus to Gashmis. Here the Rebbe brought a Ragatshava. Ragatshava says that the menorah stood on 3 legs. The shulchan, the table, in the Beis HaMikdash, stood on 4 legs. What's the hezbollah? What's the meaning for it? The menorah is in Yona Oyer, Lichtigkeit, spiritual Lichtigkeit. Something which has a shaykhus only to Ruchnias can stand on 3 pillars. What do we mean 3? The worlds of Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira. When you come to the Shulchan, on the Shulchan, what was put on the Shulchan? Gashmi is the food which has to be eaten in Gashmius. Here we are already bringing in godliness into this world, combining Getlichkeit with Gashmius. So that's why the Shulchan required 4 legs, because here we're already indicating Af Asisif, coming down into Olam Asiyah and bringing Kedusha into Olam Asiyah. What does Perek Gimel start with? Histakel b'shloisha dvarim. Look into 3 things. Look into 3 things. You'll see, the stress is that in Hebrew every word is accurate. If you want to say you see something, you say roye. What does histakel mean? Histakel means to see. However, histakel means a deeper insight. It's not just when we look at something, it's histakelus is tief reingeguckt. We really look into something deeper. So he says, histakel b'shloisha dvarim. If we will look into these 3 things properly, this will hold us back from coming to an Avera. In other words, when there is a histaklus into the inyanim of Gimel, of Atzilus, Bria, Yitzira, this will hold back from coming l'dei Avera in Olam Asiyah. The 4th Perek, which is the 4th, is also Ben Zayma. And he also lists 3 things. Ezo Chacham, Ezo Giber, and Ezo Oshir. And then he comes, not only these 3, but he comes already to a 4th inyan. Ezo Mechubad, who can be considered an honored person on Mechabed Sabrius. So what do we see? This Perek Gimel stresses the Maila of 3. Perek Dalet stresses the Maila of 4. Because that's Perek Dalet. Says that we also find that everything is accurate not only in the text of the Mishnah, of the Perek, but also the way the Mishnahs were divided. The Mishnahs were divided. The Prokim are divided into Mishnahs. Perek Gimel has 18 Mishnahs. Perek Dalet has 22 Mishnahs. This is something which the Alter Rebbe added on, that the Alter Rebbe put Pirkei Avos into the Siddur, because the Alter Rebbe was careful not only with the text of the Mishnahs, but even with the number of Mishnahs, how many Mishnahs we have in each Perek. What difference is it if you're talking about 18 Mishnahs, you're talking about 25 Mishnahs, 22 Mishnahs? The Rebbe says, one Shabbos gives bracha to the next Shabbos. For the entire week, but not only for the entire week, it ties us into the next Shabbos, until next Shabbos, including Shabbos. What is next Shabbos? Next Shabbos is Chav Hei Elul, 25 days in the month of Elul. What happened on the 25th of Elul? That is the day when the Rebbeinu created the world. How did the Rebbeinu create the world? With the 22 Oisiyos of Aleph Beis. So therefore, the second Perek of today, which is like more shows the Shaykhs to the latter part of the week, meaning the Shaykhs to next week, is a Perek that has 22 Mishnahs, because Chav Hei Be'elul, the world which was created with 22 Oisiyos, was created on Chav Hei Be'elul. Regarding the Rashi in this week's Sedra, Rabbi raised question in Pashas Kisavoi. There's a famous pasuk. Pasuk is quoted in Chassidus. It's a pasuk which tells us about the importance of serving the Rebbeinu with joy, with happiness. So the pasuk says, "Tachas asher lo yavadetos Hashem elekecha," for not serving the Rebbeinu b'simcha v'tuv lavav, with happiness. Now in Hebrew, leiv means a heart. Lavav is already plural. Pasuk here uses the expression uvetuv lavav, plural, double heart. We remember in Chumash Dvarim there's the pasuk about serving the Rebbeinu Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha. So there Rashi raises the question, why is it mentioned levavcha and not lipcha? So Rashi tells us why, because leiv is one heart, levavcha is two hearts. We have to serve the Rebbeinu with both of our hearts, with the right side and the left side. So if Rashi is concerned when there's an expression in the pasuk where the pasuk uses a double expression on heart, Rashi explains it. Why doesn't Rashi mention here anything when the pasuk uses the expression b'simcha v'tuv lavav? Pasuk could have said v'tuv leiv, and the pasuk says tuv lavav, so Rashi should have raised the question. Excuse me. So the Rebbe is learning, it's not that Rashi raises a question each time it's mentioned lavav plural. And the child who's learning Chumash is familiar with the rules and regulations of Rashi when Rashi does mention a question why it's mentioned plural and when Rashi doesn't. Mostly it's mentioned plural and Rashi doesn't make any issue. Why? Because this is how the Torah uses the expression Dibra Torah Koloshim B'nei Adam. This is how people speak. People are not in common language. When people talk, you don't differentiate whether you're saying one heart or two hearts. You use an expression levav, and you mean the heart. You don't get involved into detail whether it means one heart or two hearts. However, where the pasuk does use levav, and Rashi finds something that could strengthen the pshat in the pasuk, could add to the understanding of the pasuk, that is when Rashi mentions it. So when we have a pasuk, V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha, that we're supposed to love the Rebbeinu with all our heart, here Rashi sees room to interpret why the pasuk says levavcha and not lipcha, because he's strengthening the way how we have to love the Rebbeinu. Don't love the Rebbeinu just with one heart, love him with both of your heart. But in general, when the pasuk, all over throughout Torah, the Rebbe says there are countless times in Torah when it's heart with singular or plural, and Rashi is not getting involved to explain why it's mentioned plural, because this is the expression of the pasuk. Only there where it could add to the understanding, of the pasuk, this is where Rashi adds a commentary on. But we also paid attention today to the beginning of the arrival of orchim, of guests that are coming here for Tishrei, and the Rebbe referred to the Chazal, G'doila hachnosas orchim yoisa mekabolas pnei hashchina, that the greeting of guests is greater than greeting the Rebbeinu, and to take part physically in it, the Rebbe, during the month of Tishrei, the Rebbe always takes the platter of cake from the Farbrengen and gives it to Rabbi Moshe Yaroslavsky, who's in charge of taking care of the guests. The Rebbe spoke about the guests that are arriving and gives it to him that he should distribute it to the guests. The Rebbe was talking about the Orchim that are arriving here. The Rebbe says they come here to be in the Dalin Amos, the area of the Frierdiker Rebbe, to be able to be in this place where he learned Torah and where he davened and where he gave tzedakah and also to go on his oil. And this is what these orchem are coming for. This is how the Rebbe speaks about it. And the Melem had to take part in this Achnosas Orchem. The Rebbe gave from his cake and from his wine, from the Farbrengen, to take part in it. The Rebbe concluded the Farbrengen with a wish for Ksiva Vachsime Tova, and the Rebbe itemized a bracha on each letter of the Aleph Beis, starting from Shnas Oira, the year of Lichtigkeit, Shnas Bracha, Gebenchtiyah, Shnas Gila, the year of joy, Shnas Ditza, which is another expression of joy, and went through the entire Aleph Beis. On some letters he said only one thing, on some of the letters he said more than one. Came to Mem, Lamed, he said Shnas Loimdes, the year of learning Torah. Mem, you'll understand what the Rebbe said on Mem, a year of Mashiach. Shnas Mashiach Tzidkenu, a year that Mashiach should come and take us out of Golus. And so going through the entire Aleph Beis until he came to letter Tov. And he listed several things on Tov, that it should be a Shnas Torah, and a Shnas Tefillah, and a Shnas Tshuva.
What is the Rebbe saying?
It was a hard opinion
Why did you explain
Okay. In Rambam, the Rebbe learned an Indian in today's Shir Rambam. I'm sorry? Oh, also the Rambam, very good. So, Lekutei Levi Yitzchak, I don't recall. And it's a Lekutei Levi Yitzchak in Parsha Shlach. In this week's Sedra, there's no Lekutei Levi Yitzchak. So the Rebbe had an Indian in Parsha Shlach, which has the Shaykhs to this week's Sedra. Regarding the Rambam, it's a Rambam in the halachas of Tumah. And the Rebbe stressed on one word in the Rambam, where so the halachas of Metame Mishcha v'Moshav, and there's an expression of Amoid v'Nase Melachtenu. It's regarding a seat, for example. And if the seat is Mekabel Tumah or it isn't Mekabel Tumah. So if we say Amoid v'Nase Melachtenu, let's go, we're not going to use this, and we're going to do our work. So if we're going to do our work, then this thing is no longer Mekabel Tumah. You can look it up in the Prakim to find the details. So the Rebbe stressed, what's the Lashon Amoid? Nase Melachtenu. We will go ahead and we will do what we have to. I was explaining that every word in the Rambam is accurate, and the Rambam is also giving us views into all mitzvahs, insights into all mitzvahs. So the Rambam is saying that when we go ahead and we make sure that something is not accessible to Tumah, it's amoy. We are uplifting it. Not just we're walking away from it. It's something when we see that something is not will not be accepting tumah, it's an insight uplift to the thing, it's an amoid, because the tumah which comes into it, this is a reflection of ruchnis the tumah. So if it's not there begashmis, it's not there beruchnis, it's not there from lamaila. So therefore it's an union of amoid.
Where can one find those explanations on the letters of the elephants, all the brachas?
In Yom Kippur davening.
Oh,
that's right.
Okay. And also, why does Rashi need to mention the thing about Levavcha? Because didn't we find it all the way in Bereshis where it talked about the angels also, and they were by Abraham again. And it said something about one learned, Lev and Levavcha. And if it was already explained once, why explain it again?
Because it's negayah to the Inyan. Rashi wants to stress we should know how to fulfill properly Avos Hashem. So that's why Rashi has to mention it. Can't rely on anything else. It's helpful to understand this specific pasuk, but otherwise Rashi doesn't get involved in details, whether it's leiv or lavavcha. These are the yukim which.
So any time it helps something practical, immediately he'll explain it.
Yes.
Again.
Yes.
If 3 legs are beruchnias, how come the world stands on 3 legs? Torah, Avodah, Gemilas, Sod.
It's a good point. Pillars. Okay.
How much of that was the Rogat Shavar? The Rogat Shavar used the one. The Rogat Shavar's limit was that the menorah is ruchnistic light. Therefore, ruchnis when it's 3 and tashmis needs 4.
Yes.
And then the Rebbe applied it to Dalad Olamas Gemilas.
A good